I never thought my life would change during a routine flight from Boston to Chicago. Funny how your whole world can flip upside down at 30,000 feet. My name is Quinn, and until 6 months ago, I was living my dream as a flight attendant. The job had everything I wanted: travel, independence, and a chance to meet people from all walks of life. Plus, it's how I met my husband, Ethan, a pilot who won me over with his terrible aviation puns and genuine smile. That day started like any other. Clear skies, full flight, the usual mix of business travelers and families. I was doing my final beverage service when the first jolt hit. Not unusual, turbulence happens all the time. But then came the second hit. And the third. Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats immediately and fasten your seatbelts, I announced, trying to keep my voice steady. I barely made it halfway down the aisle when the plane dropped like a stone. They later told me I hit the ceiling before crashing onto the beverage cart. I don't remember that part. What I do remember is lying there, unable to move, staring at spilled coffee spreading across the cabin floor while a child somewhere behind me cried. The doctors used words like severe spinal injury and lucky to walk again. Ethan stayed by my side through it all, but I could see the guilt eating at him. He wasn't flying that day, but somehow he felt responsible. His sister, Vanessa, visited once during my 3-week hospital stay. She brought flowers and that look people give you when they're thinking, "Thank God it's not me. At least you can still work ground crew," she said, patting my hand. "And Ethan makes enough to support you both." The way she said it made it sound like a consolation prize. Now I'm home, learning to navigate this new version of my life. Physical therapy 3 times a week, a desk job at the airport that feels like a cruel joke, and family dinners where Vanessa's perfect life is always the main course. She doesn't mean to be insensitive, at least that's what Ethan says. But there's something in the way she looks at me now, like she's waiting for me to crack. Last night, I overheard her on the phone while she thought I was resting. "Poor Quinn," she said, "she's just not the same person anymore. I worry about Ethan, you know? He deserves someone who can keep up with him." I lay there in the dark, feeling something shift inside me. Maybe she's right. I'm not the same person anymore. But Vanessa's about to find out that different doesn't mean broken. Moving into our new house should have felt like a fresh start. Instead, I found myself watching Ethan carry box after box while I sat uselessly in my wheelchair, still adjusting to what the doctors called my temporary mobility aid. The irony wasn't lost on me, a former flight attendant who now couldn't even climb her own stairs. "You've done wonders with the place already," Vanessa announced, breezing through our front door without knocking. She was early for our housewarming dinner, perfectly put together in a designer dress that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage. "Thanks," I said, wheeling myself toward the kitchen. "I've been trying to." "Oh, sweetie, let me help you with that," she interrupted, taking over the handles of my wheelchair. "We wouldn't want you straining yourself." Before I could protest, she'd parked me in a corner of our living room, away from the kitchen where I'd been heading to check on dinner. "Ethan told me you're still having trouble with basic tasks," she said, her voice dripping with concern. "I brought some casseroles for your freezer." I gripped my armrests, counting to 10 silently. "That's thoughtful, but I can cook just fine. The physical therapist says I'm making good progress." "Of course you are," she smiled, but her eyes said something else. "Oh, that reminds me. Mother wanted me to ask if you're still planning to host Thanksgiving? Because we could easily do it at her house instead. No one would think less of you." The doorbell rang before I could respond. Ethan's mother, Margaret, swept in with a hug for Vanessa before noticing me in my corner. "Quinn, darling," she said, her smile tightening. "The wheelchair's temporary, isn't it?" "The doctors are optimistic," I started. But Vanessa jumped in. "Actually, Mother, I was just saying maybe we should move Thanksgiving to your house. Quinn needs to focus on her recovery, not entertaining." I watched them discuss my limitations like I wasn't even there. Ethan came downstairs, kissed his mother's cheek, and joined the conversation without picking up on my growing frustration. Later that night, after they'd left, I found a business card in my kitchen. It was for a housekeeping service with a note in Vanessa's elegant handwriting. "Just until you're better. Consider it a housewarming gift." I stared at that card for a long time, remembering how she'd helped rearrange my kitchen earlier, putting everything just slightly out of my reach. How she'd mentioned, oh so casually, that Ethan seemed tired lately, probably from taking care of everything. The card crumpled in my fist. I might be in this chair, but I wasn't helpless. And I was starting to see Vanessa's help for what it really was, a carefully crafted campaign to push me out of my own life. The weekly family dinner at Margaret's house felt different this time. Maybe it was because I'd finally graduated from the wheelchair to a cane, or maybe it was the way Vanessa kept glancing at her phone, smiling at texts she wouldn't share. Either way, something was off. "I have wonderful news," Vanessa announced over dessert, practically glowing. "I'm starting my own business consulting firm." "Greg Lawson, you remember him from college, Ethan? He's backing me financially." Greg Lawson. The name triggered something in my memory, a conversation I'd overheard at work last week about a businessman under investigation for fraud. "That's amazing, sweetheart," Margaret beamed. "Quinn, dear, could you pass the coffee?" "Oh, perhaps Ethan should help with that." I gripped my cane tighter, stood up slowly, and picked up the coffee pot. "I can manage," I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my legs. As I rounded the table, Vanessa's phone lit up with another message. The name Greg flashed briefly, followed by a heart emoji. "Speaking of managing," Vanessa said, her voice honey-sweet, "how are you doing with your new position at the airport? It must be quite an adjustment, going from flying to pushing papers." The coffee pot wavered in my hand. A drop splashed onto the pristine tablecloth. "Actually," I started, but Vanessa wasn't finished. "I mean, it's inspiring, really, how you've accepted your limitations. Some people would be bitter about losing everything they worked for, but you're so brave." The room went quiet. Even Margaret stopped eating her pie. "Vanessa," Ethan warned, but she waved him off. "What?" "I'm complimenting her resilience. Though I suppose it helps having a husband who can support you. Not everyone's so lucky." Her eyes flicked meaningfully to her phone. That's when I saw it, the slight smudge of lipstick on her collar. The same shade I'd seen on Greg Lawson's cheek when he'd walked through the airport terminal last Tuesday with his wife. My hand shook, and before I could stop it, coffee spilled across the table, right onto Vanessa's phone. "Oh my God," she shrieked, jumping up. "You clumsy." She bit back the rest, but her mask had slipped. "I'm so sorry," I said, not sorry at all. "I guess I'm still adjusting to my limitations." Later that night, as Ethan drove us home in silence, I pulled up Greg Lawson's name on my phone. The investigation, his wife, his pattern of using vulnerable women in his schemes. It was all there. And now he had his hooks in Vanessa. I could warn her. Or I could wait and watch her perfect life crumble, just like she'd tried to destroy mine. The choice was mine, and for the first time since my accident, I felt powerful again. I should have known better when Vanessa suggested hosting Lucas's birthday party at our house. The smile she wore was too perfect, too rehearsed, like everything else about her. "It would mean so much to Lucas," she said over coffee in my kitchen. "And it's a chance for us to start fresh after. Well, you know." She gestured vaguely at my cane, propped against the counter. I watched her stir her coffee. 3 sugars, just like Greg Lawson took his. "Why my house?" I asked carefully. "You have that gorgeous backyard. And honestly," she leaned forward, lowering her voice, "David's been difficult about visitation lately. Having it at a family member's house might make him more comfortable." Something in her tone made me uneasy, but then Lucas bounded into the kitchen, his face lighting up when he saw me. "Aunt Quinn, can you show me your airplane pictures again?" Before I could answer, Vanessa's phone buzzed. Her expression shifted as she read the message, a flush creeping up her neck. "Actually, sweetie, we need to discuss the guest list," she said, suddenly all business. "I was thinking we could invite some of my new colleagues. Greg mentioned he'd love to see the place, and he has a son about Lucas's age." "Greg." I kept my voice neutral. "I thought this was supposed to be family." "Oh, it is. Greg's practically family now. And his business connections could be so helpful for everyone. Even you, Quinn. Maybe we could find you something more suitable than that airport job." The condescension in her voice made my fingers tighten around my coffee mug. But before I could respond, my phone lit up with a text from David. "Need to talk about Vanessa. Important. Can you meet?" "Of course we'll have to invite some of Mother's friends too," Vanessa continued, oblivious to my distraction. "And I thought we could move some furniture around to create a better flow for networking. mingling. I looked at Lucas, happily drawing at the kitchen table, blissfully unaware of whatever game his mother was playing. Then at my phone, where David's message seemed to pulse with urgency. "Sounds perfect," I heard myself say. "Let's do it." Vanessa's smile widened, triumphant. She didn't notice how my hand shook as I texted David back. "Tomorrow. Airport coffee shop. 2 p.m. As I watched her leave with Lucas, I realized I'd just agreed to let Vanessa turn my home into her personal stage. But maybe that's exactly what I needed. A front row seat to whatever she was planning. Sometimes you have to let people think they've won before you can show them how much they've lost. Lucas's birthday party had been transformed into something unrecognizable. My living room was packed with business executives in suits, while my 5-year-old nephew sat alone in the corner, playing with his new toys. "Quinn, darling," Vanessa called out, steering Greg Lawson through the crowd. "Could you get us some more wine from the cellar? The good bottles, not the ones you put out earlier." I gripped my cane tighter, watching Greg's hand rest possessively on her lower back, the same hand that wore a wedding ring in all the photos I'd found during my research. "Actually," I said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear, "I think we should bring out Lucas's cake. It is his birthday after all." Vanessa's smile flickered. "Oh, we'll do that later." Greg was just telling everyone about his new investment opportunity. "Aunt Quinn." Lucas appeared at my side, tugging my sleeve. "Can we have cake now? I'm tired." Before I could answer, Margaret swooped in. "Lucas, sweetheart, Mommy's busy with her important friends. Quinn, maybe you should rest. You're looking rather strained." That's when I saw David standing in the doorway, his face dark with anger. Our eyes met, and I knew he'd seen exactly what I had, his son forgotten at his own birthday party while his ex-wife played hostess to her married lover. "Everyone." Vanessa clinked her glass, drawing attention. "I have an exciting announcement. Thanks to Greg's generous investment, Mitchell Consulting is officially launching next month." Applause filled the room. Greg pulled Vanessa close, whispering something in her ear that made her giggle. "Get out." My voice was quiet, but it carried. The room went silent. "What did you say?" Vanessa's face hardened. "This is my house," I said, straightening to my full height despite the pain shooting through my back. "And I want you and your business associates to leave. Now." "Quinn." Ethan stepped forward, looking bewildered. "What are you doing?" "Protecting our nephew," I said, watching David move toward Lucas. "Because someone needs to remember this is a child's birthday party, not a networking event." Vanessa's mask cracked. "How dare you?" "Mother, did you hear?" "I have proof," I cut in, my voice steady. "Of everything, Vanessa. The fraud investigation into Greg's company. The affair. All of it." The color drained from her face. "You're just jealous," she hissed, but her eyes darted nervously to Greg, who had suddenly become very interested in his phone. "Jealous that I have a future while you're stuck here, broken and—" "Get out," I repeated louder this time, "before I show everyone exactly who's broken." The party dissolved into chaos after that. But as guests rushed out and Vanessa screamed accusations, all I could see was Lucas, finally smiling as David carried him away from the wreckage of his mother's ambition. The morning after Lucas's party, I found Ethan packing a suitcase. Not his usual pilot's bag. This was larger, more final. "I need some time," he said, not meeting my eyes. Mother offered her guest room. I stood in the doorway, my cane trembling against the floor. "Because I ruined Vanessa's big moment? Because you humiliated my family?" He finally looked at me, and I barely recognized him. "Greg's wife called Margaret this morning. She's filing for divorce. His company's pulling their investment from Vanessa's firm. You've destroyed everything she worked for." "Everything she worked for?" My laugh sounded hollow. "You mean the affair she was having with a married man? The business built on fraud?" "You don't know that for sure." He zipped the suitcase with finality. "But what I do know is my sister is devastated, and my mother." He shook his head. "She says she doesn't recognize you anymore." "And you?" My voice cracked. "Do you recognize me, Ethan?" Before he could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from David, "Emergency. Hospital. Lucas." The world tilted. I grabbed my keys, but Ethan was already heading for the door. "I'll drive you," he said, his tone professional distant. Like I was just another passenger. At the hospital, We found David pacing the pediatric ward. Vanessa took him, he said, his face ashen. After the party, she was drinking, upset about Greg. She picked Lucas up from my place this morning, said they were going for ice cream. They got into an accident. My legs gave out. Ethan caught me before I hit the floor, muscle memory overriding his anger. Lucas is okay? David continued quickly. Minor concussion. But Vanessa. He gestured helplessly at the ICU doors. Margaret burst through the waiting room doors, her mascara streaked. When she saw me, her eyes went cold. Are you happy now? She hissed. Your revenge nearly killed my daughter and grandson. Mother, Ethan warned, but she wasn't finished. You couldn't stand that Vanessa was moving forward while you were stuck, could you? Had to drag everyone down to your level. I wanted to defend myself, to explain about Greg's fraud, about protecting Lucas. But looking at their faces, Ethan's disappointment, Margaret's hatred, David's exhaustion, the words died in my throat. A doctor emerged from the ICU. Mrs. Mitchell is stable, she announced. But there's something else. Her blood work showed elevated HCG levels. She's approximately 8 weeks pregnant. The silence that followed was deafening. Greg's wife had announced their pregnancy at 6 weeks. The math wasn't hard. I watched the color drain from David's face as he realized what this meant. Watched Ethan struggle to process this new betrayal. And I realized that in trying to expose Vanessa's lies, I'd torn apart the only family I had left. Some victories feel an awful lot like defeat. 3 days after the accident, I found myself alone in Vanessa's hospital room. The steady beep of monitors filled the silence as I watched her pretend to sleep. I know you're awake, I said quietly. The nurses mentioned you've been conscious since yesterday. Her eyes opened, cold and calculating despite the bruises on her face. Come to gloat. No. I settled into the chair beside her bed, my cane across my lap. I came because Greg's wife called me. She wanted to thank me for exposing the truth. Vanessa's monitor beeped faster. You had no right. She's keeping the baby, I continued. Greg's going to prison for fraud. The SEC found evidence that he was planning to use your consulting firm to launder money. Did you know? Her face crumpled for just a moment before the mask slipped back into place. You don't understand. I had to prove that you were better than me. I leaned forward. That's what this was all about, wasn't it? You couldn't stand that Ethan chose someone like me, someone who didn't fit your perfect family image. Perfect. She laughed, bitter and broken. You think our family was perfect? Mother always pushing us to be more, to achieve more. Ethan was the golden child, the successful pilot. And I was just there. Until Greg. He made me feel special. By using you. By risking Lucas's future. Lucas. Her voice caught. David won't let me see him. Says I'm unfit. You drove drunk with our nephew in the car, Vanessa. What did you expect? Tears slid down her cheeks. I expected my family to understand. To support me, like they supported you after your accident. They supported me because I didn't try to destroy everyone around me. I stood, my legs steady for the first time in months. The difference between us isn't our achievements or our failures. It's that I never needed to tear others down to build myself up. The door opened. Ethan stood there, looking between us with tired eyes. Quinn, what are you doing here? Before I could answer, Vanessa spoke. She came to show me what rock bottom looks like. Her voice cracked. And she's right. About everything. The monitors beeped in the silence that followed. Finally, Ethan stepped into the room, but instead of going to his sister, he came to my side. I heard the recordings, he said quietly. The ones Greg's wife found. Of you and him planning to use Lucas's party to convince investors. He shook his head. How could you, Vanessa? She closed her eyes, tears streaming freely now. I don't know who I am anymore. That makes 2 of us, Ethan said, taking my hand. Come on, Quinn. Let's go home. As we left, I realized revenge wasn't what I'd wanted after all. Sometimes justice is watching someone face their own truth in the mirror. 6 months after the accident, I stood in our new kitchen, watching the morning sun paint shadows across unfamiliar walls. The pregnancy test on the counter showed 2 pink lines, clear as day. Quinn. Ethan called from downstairs. David's here with Lucas. I tucked the test into my pocket, not ready to share this particular miracle just yet. Making my way down. No cane needed anymore. I found Lucas already setting up his favorite airplane toys on our living room floor. Aunt Quinn. He launched himself at me, and I caught him easily. Dad says we can stay for dinner. Can we make those cookies like last time? Lucas, David warned gently. Remember what we talked about? Ask first if Quinn's feeling up to it. I hugged Lucas tighter, remembering how close we'd come to losing him. I'm always up for cookies with my favorite co-pilot. As Lucas raced to the kitchen, David handed me an envelope. Vanessa's latest visitation request. She's different now. 3 months of therapy, completely sober. She asked me to give you this too. Inside was a handwritten note. I'm sorry for trying to break what was already broken in me. Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like. That evening, after cookies were baked and Lucas was thoroughly covered in chocolate, Margaret stopped by. She stood awkwardly in our doorway, clutching her purse. I brought a housewarming gift, she said, offering a small package. Inside was a delicate silver frame holding a photo I'd never seen, Ethan and me on our wedding day, laughing at something off camera. I was wrong about you, Quinn. About so many things. Later, as Ethan and I got ready for bed, I finally showed him the pregnancy test. His face lit up with joy, then shifted to concern. Are you sure you're ready? After everything, I thought about Vanessa, about how fear of inadequacy can poison everything it touches, about how revenge had nearly cost me the family I was trying to protect, about how strength sometimes means letting go of the past to build something new. I'm ready, I said, taking his hand. But I want to tell Vanessa first. He looked surprised. Really? She's still Lucas's mother. Still your sister. And maybe. I placed his hand on my stomach. Maybe this baby needs to know that people can change. That family is complicated but worth fighting for. Even when they hurt us? Especially then. I smiled, remembering the little girl I'd been, dreaming of flying. Sometimes the hardest landings teach us the most about taking off again. That night, I dreamed of turbulence, but this time I wasn't falling. I was soaring, with room enough in the sky for everyone who wanted to rise.